I sat there, trying my best to smile, as Mason slid a steaming cup of coffee across the table to me. It was supposed to be a gesture of kindness, a thoughtful offering from my husband James, who had been practicing his brewing skills for weeks. "Go ahead, babe," he said, his voice too bright, almost forced. "I made it just for you." I hesitated, looking at the cup, the steam curling up in delicate tendrils. It smelled off, like metal mixed with burnt coffee grounds, nothing like the rich aroma I was used to. My stomach churned, but I forced myself to take a sip, pretending not to notice the way my hands trembled slightly. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in my stomach. The coffee in front of me still emitted a strange metallic smell that lingered in the air. I hadn't been feeling well for weeks, but I always tried to brush it off. It was just stress, I'd tell myself. Long hours at work, juggling clients, meetings, and the constant pressure from James to be perfect. But today something felt different. The coffee smelled wrong, and I couldn't ignore that feeling in the pit of my stomach. My name is Ava Carter, and I used to be the person everyone could count on. At 29, I had it all: a thriving career in marketing, a loving husband, and a future that seemed bright. But as the years went by, I started noticing the cracks in the picture-perfect life I had built. Things weren't as they seemed. The more successful I became, the more I started feeling like something was slipping through my fingers. James, my husband, had always been the charming, attentive partner. When we first met at a business conference in New York 3 years ago, I was captivated by his charisma. He was smart, driven, and somehow always knew just how to make people feel like they were the most important person in the room. Our relationship progressed quickly, too quickly perhaps. We married within the year, and things seemed perfect at first, but over time I began to notice a shift in James. He became distant, often absent for long hours, lost in work or secretive phone calls. His interactions with Catherine, his assistant, started raising red flags. I tried to ignore it, chalking it up to work stress. He insisted that I was being paranoid, but the whispers of suspicion continued to echo in my mind. And now, this coffee. The metallic smell was enough to make my stomach churn. I couldn't ignore it anymore. There was something wrong, something deeper than just a bad batch of coffee. My eyes drifted over to Mason, who was seated across from me at the dining table. He was the CEO of Veritas Innovations, a company I had worked for the past 5 years. He was also James's best friend, and for the most part, I considered him to be someone I could trust. But something in his eyes told me that trust had been misplaced. There was an emptiness in his gaze, like he knew something I didn't. "You've been quiet, Ava," Mason said, his voice smooth but with an underlying edge that I couldn't place. "Is the coffee not to your liking?" I smiled weakly, trying to hide the anxiety that was bubbling up inside me. "It's fine, Mason. Just a little different from what I'm used to." James glanced at me, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. I could see the tension in his face, the way his hands tightened around his own cup. He was trying to appear calm, but I knew him too well. There was something off about him today, something that set me on edge. Catherine, sitting beside him, stirred her own untouched coffee, her eyes focused on the swirling liquid as if it was the most interesting thing in the world. I couldn't help but notice how quiet she was, how she avoided looking at me, her usual smirk replaced with a cold indifference. I caught her eye for a moment, and for a brief second, I thought I saw something shift in her expression. Something almost like fear. I swallowed hard. This isn't right. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of there before I did something rash. I couldn't stay in this room with these people who had been hiding something from me, playing some kind of twisted game behind my back. "Excuse me," I said, standing up abruptly. "I need to make a quick call for work." I felt my heartbeat quicken as I stared at the phone, my fingers trembling slightly. The room around me seemed to blur as the weight of Jenna's words hit me. They've been planning this for months. The realization sank in deeper than I ever expected. My colleagues, people I had trusted, had been plotting against me in the shadows. And now I was standing on the edge of something much more dangerous than I ever imagined. I pressed my hand against the cold wall, trying to gather my thoughts. I needed to stay composed. I couldn't let panic take over, not when I was so close to understanding the full scope of what they had been doing. I had to be smart about this. Jenna had warned me that they were after my position, after my life's work. The Henderson project wasn't just a business deal. It was the final piece of the puzzle they needed to oust me. They had tried to undermine me for months, sabotaging meetings, orchestrating my sickness, even sending me to the hospital under the guise of mild food poisoning. They had wanted me to appear weak, unreliable, and eventually replaceable. But they didn't realize something. I wasn't as naive as I used to be. I shook off the lingering dread and took a deep breath. First, I needed proof. Proof that they had been poisoning me, poisoning my very livelihood. I knew that the moment I went to the authorities, or even confronted them directly, they'd cover their tracks. So I had to be discreet. The first thing I needed was to gather any evidence I could find in their offices. Mason's and Catherine's computers, their phones, they all had to have traces of their plan. I couldn't risk leaving anything to chance. I pulled out my phone again and texted Jenna, asking her for help. I trusted her, and she had proven time and time again that she had my back, no matter what. Jenna, I need your help. I'm going to Mason and Catherine's office tonight. I need you to cover for me. Make sure no one knows I'm gone. If I don't come back in a couple of hours, please go to the authorities. I'll send you whatever I find. I hit send and stared at the phone for a moment, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread wash over me. Jenna was the only person I trusted right now, and if something went wrong, she was the one who would take the fall with me. The message came back almost immediately. I'm on it. Be careful, Ava. Don't let them see you coming. I set my phone on silent and pocketed it, my resolve hardening as I walked back to the dining room. The air felt heavier, and I could sense the tension in the atmosphere. It was as though everything had shifted in the brief moments I'd been away. James and Mason were no longer just my colleagues, they were enemies. And Catherine, my supposed friend, had become nothing more than a traitor. I had to act fast. I had to be smarter than them. This wasn't just about my career anymore. It was about survival. The hours that followed felt like a blur. I could barely concentrate on anything around me, my mind racing as I mentally prepared for what was coming. The evening dragged on, every moment laced with tension, but I knew I couldn't wait much longer. It was time. After dinner, I excused myself from the table, acting as casual as possible. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I didn't let it show. If they suspected anything, it was over. I had to appear like I was still the Ava they all knew, the one they thought they could manipulate without question. James followed me into the hallway as I reached for my jacket. His voice was low, almost hesitant. Ava, where are you going? I paused for a moment, forcing a smile. I'm going to make a quick call. It won't take long. I walked past him without another word, the look on his face already telling me that something was wrong. He didn't trust me anymore, but that was fine. I didn't trust him either. I stepped into the study, feeling a brief flicker of dread at the sight of the room. It was supposed to be a quiet sanctuary for work, but tonight it felt more like a cage, a place where secrets had been hidden, where betrayal had taken root. I sat at the desk and quickly accessed the shared drive that housed everything from client contracts to internal communications. I wasn't a hacker, but I was resourceful, and I knew how to find things people didn't want me to find. I quickly sifted through files looking for anything suspicious. Minutes passed, each second feeling like an eternity, until I found it, a folder labeled Project Henderson. My heart skipped a beat. I opened it without hesitation. There, in black and white, was everything I needed to confirm what I had suspected all along. The documents were thorough, detailed plans, communication threads between Mason, Catherine, and James, including orders for specific toxins and instructions for administration. They had been planning my downfall for months, slowly working to discredit me, poisoning me in ways I hadn't even realized. My breath hitched in my chest. There it was, clear as day. They had been drugging my food, my drinks, to undermine me, make me sick enough to miss critical meetings. I had been their target all along. Get her out of the way, make sure she's sick enough to fail, the emails read. I couldn't breathe. My mind spun, and for a brief moment, everything around me became a blur of white noise. This wasn't just sabotage. It was a carefully orchestrated plan to destroy me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I quickly pulled it out, seeing a message from Jenna. "Did you find it? What did they do?" I typed back with trembling fingers. "It's all here. They've been poisoning me. I have the proof."
The message went through, but there was no time to wait for a response. I had what I needed, and it was time to expose them. I closed the files and quickly backed them up to an encrypted folder in my personal cloud. I wouldn't leave anything to chance. No one could destroy this evidence. I couldn't shake the feeling of adrenaline rushing through me as I locked the study door behind me. The evidence was in my hands. Every document, every message that tied James, Mason, and Catherine together in their twisted plot to destroy me. The betrayal felt like a weight, heavy and suffocating, but it also fueled me. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I could hear their voices drifting from the dining room, distant but loud enough to remind me that everything was on the verge of unraveling. I knew I needed to confront them, face the truth head on, but first, I needed to buy myself some time. I couldn't just storm into that room and accuse them without making sure I had all my bases covered. With the evidence safely stored on my phone and cloud drive, I dialed Jenna's number, my hands shaking slightly. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Her voice was steady, calm, but I could hear the concern beneath it. "Ava, did you find it?" she asked, knowing exactly what I meant. "I did," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's worse than I thought. They've been poisoning me, not just with food, but they've been planning everything for months. They've been trying to ruin me." I could hear her breath catch on the other end. "What? How? Are you okay?" "I'm fine for now, but I need you to help me. I have the proof, Jenna. They can't get away with this. I need to expose them before it's too late." "Of course, Ava. What do you need?" "I need you to help me make copies of everything. I don't want them to know I have this. We need to be ready to go public, or at least to have leverage if things go south." She hesitated. "Are you sure you're safe? You've been under so much pressure. I don't want you walking into something you can't handle." "I've been handling it for months, Jenna, and now I'm going to finish it." My words came out more fiercely than I expected. But they were true. The fear had finally shifted into something much more dangerous: determination. I wasn't going to be their victim anymore. I hung up and quickly moved through the house, making sure to be as quiet as possible. I didn't want to alert them yet. I had to bide my time. I had no idea what their next move would be, but I knew they'd be watching me, looking for any sign that I knew what they had been up to. The house was eerily silent as I stepped into the hallway, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. I stood at the foot of the stairs, gazing at the door to the dining room, my body tense with anticipation. I could hear the clink of glasses, muffled laughter. It was like nothing had changed, but everything had, and I was about to expose their lies. Taking a deep breath, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone once more, checking the time. I had about 15 minutes before the chaos began. I needed to prepare myself. I sat down on the couch, trying to calm my thoughts. My hands were steady, but my heart was racing. What would I say? How could I confront James and Mason without them having time to cover up their tracks? I was still deep in thought when I heard footsteps. James. He was walking toward me, his figure visible through the doorway. His eyes narrowed slightly as he saw me, but then his face softened. That familiar, almost comforting expression on his face. "Ava, you okay?" he asked, a little too casually. His voice held a tinge of concern, but it felt hollow, fake. I straightened up, glancing at him with controlled calm. "Fine," I replied, trying to hide the anger in my voice. "Just a little tired." James stepped closer, reaching out for my hand. "You've been working so hard. Maybe you should take a break. We can relax tonight, just the two of us." I pulled my hand away, my eyes locking with his. There was no warmth in my gaze, only cold calculation. No, James, I've been trying to figure out what's going on around here, and I think I finally have an answer. His face stiffened, and for a brief moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Fear. I didn't give him a chance to respond. I know about your little plan, I said, my voice steady, unwavering. I know what you and Mason have been doing. Poisoning me, trying to ruin my career. I've seen the messages, the emails. You can't hide from me anymore. James's face drained of color, and he took a step back. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His usual charm and composure had vanished, leaving behind the man I had once trusted, now a stranger, caught in his own lies. I didn't want it to go this far, Ava, he stammered, his voice cracking. We were just trying to make you slow down. You've been pushing yourself too hard. I didn't think it would. You didn't think it would what, James? I cut him off, my voice growing louder with every word. You didn't think I'd find out. You didn't think it would kill me? I stood up now, my hands clenched into fists by my sides. You tried to destroy me, James. You and Mason. You both tried to ruin my life. And now I'm going to make sure the world knows exactly what you've done. The silence that followed was deafening. His eyes darted around, his mind clearly racing as he tried to come up with a response, but nothing came. He was trapped. The truth was out, and there was no escaping it. The silence between us stretched on, thick and suffocating. James stood there, his eyes darting nervously around the room, as though searching for an escape that no longer existed. My heart was pounding in my chest, but my voice remained calm, cutting through the tension with a sharpness that surprised even me. You thought I wouldn't notice, didn't you? I said, my voice low but unwavering. You thought I was too naive, too caught up in my own world to see what was really happening right under my nose. James didn't answer. He just stood there, his face pale, his breathing shallow. I could feel his panic building, the facade of calm he'd carried for months slowly disintegrating. I was always too busy, wasn't I? I continued, stepping closer to him. Too busy handling the clients, too busy handling everything while you two worked in the shadows. You thought I wouldn't figure out that every time I ate with you, I got sick. You thought the hospital trips were just a coincidence. But I knew. Deep down, I knew. I took another step forward, now just inches away from him. But I had no idea how far you were willing to go, how much you wanted to take from me. His lips trembled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I didn't want it to go this far, Ava. Please, you have to understand. I just wanted you to stop working yourself to death. You were making yourself sick. You didn't listen. You wouldn't listen to me. We just needed you to take a break. His voice cracked, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. I didn't mean for you to get hurt. I never wanted that. I stepped back, shaking my head. The lies were so thick I could hardly breathe. Stop it, James, I snapped. Just stop. You and Mason poisoned me because you wanted to take everything I had. You wanted my job, my clients, everything. And you didn't care if you destroyed me in the process. He stepped forward then, grabbing my arm with a force that made me flinch. Please, Ava, he whispered, his voice pleading. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought this would make you realize that you needed help. I was just trying to protect you. I love you, damn it. The words hit me like a slap. I recoiled from him, jerking my arm free. You love me? Is that what this is about? My voice was rising now, raw with anger. You love me so much that you wanted to poison me, destroy everything I worked for. You love me so much that you thought it was okay to try and make me disappear? He flinched, his face contorting with guilt and regret. But there was something else in his eyes, something that flickered for just a second, an emotion I couldn't quite place. I'm sorry, Ava, I really am, he said, his voice barely audible. I didn't know what else to do. I was just so afraid of losing everything. Afraid of losing everything? I repeated, my voice incredulous. You are losing everything, James. You've lost me. You've lost my trust. You've lost everything. And there's no way you can ever get that back. He stumbled back, as though my words were physically pushing him away. His shoulders slumped, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a man who was completely broken. But I wasn't done. You want to know what the worst part is, James? I asked, my voice trembling with fury. The worst part is that I thought you were better than this. I thought you were someone I could rely on, someone I could trust, but you turned into someone I don't even recognize. The tears welled up in my eyes, but I wiped them away quickly, refusing to let him see the weakness he had forced upon me, the vulnerability he had tried to exploit. I wasn't going to cry for him, not anymore. And then, without warning, everything I had been holding inside of me broke loose. You've ruined me, James, I said, my voice raw and choking. You've ruined me, and now I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. I'm going to make sure everyone sees you for who you really are. James's face paled, and he took a step back, his breath catching in his throat. Ava, please, don't. But it was too late. I was done. The fear, the pain, the anger, it all came rushing out in a wave of realization. I had been duped, manipulated, poisoned, and betrayed by the people I trusted most, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I grabbed my phone from the counter, quickly sending a text to Jenna. It's time. I have everything. Mason and Catherine are done. A moment later, I heard a notification on my phone. Jenna's response came through. I'm ready. Get out of there, Ava. We'll make sure they pay. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. As I walked toward the front door, I turned to face James one last time. His face was still a mask of disbelief, his lips parted in a silent plea for forgiveness. But I wasn't going to forgive him. Not this time. You've made your choice, James, I said, my voice unwavering. Now I'm making mine. With that, I stepped outside into the cool night air, my heart still pounding in my chest, but now filled with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Strength. The door slammed behind me, the sharp sound echoing in the quiet night. The cool air hit my skin, sending a shiver down my spine. My heart was still pounding in my chest, the adrenaline refusing to subside. I couldn't believe what had just happened, what I had just said to him. It felt like a blur, the weight of his betrayal crushing me. But now that the words were out, there was no turning back. I could hear the muffled voices from inside the house. James, probably still pleading, trying to get me to listen, to come back. But I didn't care anymore. He had lied to me, manipulated me, and worst of all, he had tried to destroy everything I had worked for. He didn't deserve my time, my attention, or my forgiveness. I stood on the porch for a few moments, just breathing, trying to steady myself. This wasn't just about James, or even Mason and Catherine. This was bigger. This was about me taking control of my own life, reclaiming my power after months of fear, manipulation, and deceit. They thought they could break me. They thought they could make me disappear, but they were wrong. I was stronger than they ever realized. I pulled out my phone, quickly dialing Jenna's number. My fingers were still shaking, but my resolve was ironclad. I needed her now more than ever. Jenna, I said when she picked up, my voice low but filled with certainty. It's done. I've got the proof, and I'm going to make sure they pay for what they've done. Ava, are you okay? What happened? Did he? I'm fine. I cut her off, my voice firmer than I expected. James tried to play the victim, but I've got everything. The texts, the messages, the recordings, it's all there. I knew something was off, Jenna replied, her voice tight with concern. But this, I didn't realize how deep it went. What's your next move? I'm going to the police. I'm reporting them for attempted poisoning, conspiracy, and fraud. They need to be held accountable for everything they've done. You're sure? Once you go to the police, there's no turning back. This could get ugly, Ava. I paused, glancing back toward the house. Inside, I knew James was scrambling, likely trying to cover his tracks, trying to make everything go back to the way it was. But there was no going back. I don't care how ugly it gets, I said, my voice resolute. I've spent too long letting them control my life. I'm not backing down now. Okay, Jenna said, her tone softer now, but still filled with determination. I'll help you however I can. Just make sure you're safe. Don't do this alone. I won't, I assured her. I'm done being their victim. This ends tonight. I hung up the phone and stood still for a moment, letting the weight of my decisions settle over me. The fear I had carried for so long was now replaced with something stronger. Anger, yes, but also a sense of justice. It was time to take back control. I turned and walked away from the house, heading toward my car. I had already made up my mind. There was no way I was letting them get away with this. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let them destroy me without a fight. As I pulled out of the driveway, the street lights flickered past, the only sound the hum of my engine and the pounding of my heart. My phone buzzed again, and I glanced down to see a text from Jenna. Be careful, Ava. They're not going to give up easily. I knew she was right. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't going to let them control my life any longer. This was the end of their games, and the beginning of my own fight for justice. I drove to the police station with purpose, the dark streets unfolding before me like a path I had to walk. I had prepared myself for this moment, gathered everything I needed to show the authorities the full extent of Mason and Catherine's betrayal. The evidence was irrefutable. The messages, the recordings, the documented poisonings, everything they had done to destroy me. They thought they could play me for a fool, but they had underestimated me. When I arrived at the station, the air inside felt cold and sterile, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The officer at the desk looked up when I entered, his face an unreadable mask. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice professional but distant. "I need to speak to someone about a serious matter," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "It's about an ongoing poisoning case. I have evidence, and I need protection." The officer raised an eyebrow, but didn't question me further. He simply nodded and gestured toward a hallway. "This way, ma'am. Follow me." I walked down the narrow corridor, my footsteps echoing on the cold tile floor. My hands were clammy, but I forced myself to keep it together. I was ready. I had everything I needed, and now they were going to pay. As I entered the small interview room, I was greeted by Detective Summers, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She stood up when I entered and shook my hand firmly. "Ms. Ava, what's this about?" she asked, her voice businesslike, but with an edge of curiosity. "I have evidence that my husband, Mason, and Catherine have been poisoning me over the past few months. I have recordings, text messages, everything. They've been trying to ruin my career and my life, and it's time they paid for what they've done." I laid the evidence out before her. The recordings from my phone, the text messages, even the medical records from the times I had been hospitalized. Detective Summers listened carefully, her expression neutral, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She glanced at the documents I had provided, then back at me. "This is serious, Ms. Ava," she said. "You're saying your husband and his colleague have been poisoning you, intentionally?" "Yes," I replied, my voice steady but laced with the emotion I had been holding back for so long. "It wasn't just a few incidents. They've been trying to take me out, trying to sabotage my career. But I have the proof, and I'm not going to let them get away with it." Detective Summers nodded. "We're going to take this seriously, Ms. Avenue. We'll need to investigate, but with this evidence, we'll be able to move forward." A wave of relief washed over me, but I couldn't let my guard down. I knew this was just the beginning. James, Mason, and Catherine weren't going to go down easily. But this time, it was my turn to be in control. It was my turn to fight. I took a deep breath, ready for whatever came next. This battle wasn't over yet. The weight of the situation sank deeper into my bones as I sat in the sterile, buzzing interrogation room. The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed to mock the intensity of my thoughts. Detective Summers had assured me that they were taking the case seriously, but I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability that had crept in when I left the police station. I knew Mason and Catherine were going to fight back hard. This wasn't going to be easy. I glanced at my phone. No new messages. Jenna had been quiet ever since our last conversation. I couldn't blame her. The stakes had escalated so quickly. I leaned back in the uncomfortable chair, trying to steady my breathing. There was no turning back now. The doors swung open, and Detective Summers entered, her stern face softening slightly when she saw me. She took a seat across from me, folding her hands together. "We've reviewed the evidence you provided," she started, her voice measured but firm. "Your recordings, texts, and the medical records. It all checks out. We've also started looking into Mason and Catherine. Things aren't looking good for them, Ava. We have enough to charge them with conspiracy to commit murder, among other things." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Murder. That word was no longer just a distant concept, a word on a piece of paper. It was real. I had been their target. It had started as a simple attempt to ruin my career. But now I understood the full scope of their plan. "Have you spoken to James?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the tumultuous emotions threatening to overtake me. "Has he been informed of the charges?" Detective Summers shifted in her seat, her gaze hardening slightly. "James is playing a dangerous game. He's trying to act like he had no idea what Catherine was planning, but his involvement is clear. We've spoken to some of his colleagues, and the picture is becoming clearer by the hour." I nodded, feeling a cold rage build inside me. I had spent years trusting James, believing that he was the man I married. But all along, he had been a part of this twisted plot. I had been the pawn in his sick game. And now I was done. "When do we make the move?" I asked. "I need to know when this is going to be over. I need to know they'll pay for what they've done." Detective Summers met my gaze, her eyes filled with a mix of resolve and empathy. "We'll move quickly, Ava. We're working on getting a warrant for Mason and Catherine's homes. We're also tracing some of the pharmaceutical companies they've been dealing with. This won't be an overnight job, but we're getting closer." I exhaled sharply, my heart thundering in my chest. I want this over now. I don't want to wait any longer. I want to see them pay for everything they've done to me. "You'll get your chance," Summers assured me, standing up. "The wheels of justice are in motion, and it's only a matter of time before Mason and Catherine get what's coming to them. You've done the hard part, Ava. You've given us the proof we needed." I stood with her, feeling a slight sense of relief flood my body. But that relief was short-lived. As I walked out of the room, I knew this was just the beginning of something much bigger than I had ever imagined. The next few days passed in a blur of police reports, meetings, and a growing sense of dread. I kept my head down at work, pretending nothing was wrong, while I prepared for the inevitable fallout. Jenna had been supportive, offering to help me in any way she could. But I knew the true battle was still ahead. The case was progressing, but every time my phone buzzed, my heart skipped a beat. Was it the police? Was it James trying to reach me? I couldn't let my guard down. I couldn't trust anyone anymore. Then, a week later, I received a call that would change everything. It was Detective Summers again, her voice low and serious. "Ava, we need you to come down to the station. We've got something you need to see." My stomach dropped. "What is it? What's happened?" "It's about Mason and Catherine. We've found something big. You need to see it in person." I felt the blood drain from my face. My mind raced, and I could hear the faintest tremor in my voice as I responded, "I'm on my way." I arrived at the station within minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. What could they have found? What was bigger than everything I already knew? When I entered the room, Detective Summers was waiting for me, her expression grim. She handed me a folder, thick with documents. "What's this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We've been digging into Mason and Catherine's finances. There are some things they've been hiding: money laundering, illegal dealings with the pharmaceutical companies, and something far worse. We've found a link to an underground syndicate." I looked at her confused. "What do you mean?" "There's a deeper layer to this, Ava. Mason and Catherine didn't just want to ruin your career. They've been involved in much bigger crimes. The poisoning, the sabotage. It was part of a larger scheme. They were trying to get control of a multi-million-dollar drug deal, and you were collateral damage. I stumbled back slightly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I was hearing. The betrayal was even worse than I had ever imagined. They weren't just trying to destroy me. They were using me as a pawn in something far more dangerous. Detective Summers continued, her voice steady but urgent. We need you to help us nail them. They're not just going to stop with you, Ava. They've got connections, people who'll do anything to protect them. But if we get the right information from you, we can bring the whole operation down. I nodded, swallowing hard. What do I need to do? We're going to set up a meeting, Summers said, her tone unyielding. We need you to act like nothing's changed. We need to catch them in the act. I felt a wave of dread wash over me, but I pushed it down. This was it. This was my chance to make sure they paid for everything. I wasn't going to let them win, not this time. The next few days were spent preparing for the meeting. I had to keep my composure, act like everything was normal, even though inside I was shaking with fear and anticipation. I knew this was dangerous, but I also knew I had no choice. Jenna helped me keep my head straight, reminding me of the importance of staying focused. This is bigger than just Mason and Catherine, she told me. This is about stopping them from doing this to anyone else. The night of the meeting arrived, and I was ready. I had everything I needed, the proof, the resolve, and the courage to see this through. There was no turning back now. The final confrontation was about to begin. The days that followed were filled with a sense of urgency and calculated preparation. I was no longer just trying to survive the storm. I was ready to take control of it. I knew what I had to do. I had to face Mason and Catherine, the people who had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable, and expose their lies once and for all. The night of the meeting came, and with it, an overwhelming sense of finality. I couldn't afford to show fear, not when everything was on the line. I stood in front of the mirror, straightening my dress, adjusting my hair, and making sure I looked every bit the confident professional I had always been. The old Ava, weak, uncertain, was gone. This version of me was sharper, stronger, determined to win. I could hear the faint buzz of my phone in my pocket. It was Jenna. I had texted her just before I left, telling her I was about to meet with Mason and Catherine. The time had come. The pieces of their scheme were about to fall into place. The only thing left was to confront them. The location was familiar, one of the upscale private meeting rooms that Mason and Catherine loved to use for their little power games. The conference table gleamed under the soft lights, and the atmosphere felt oddly suffocating, as if the walls themselves were closing in on me. I walked in, my heels clicking on the marble floor, the sound punctuating the silence as I entered. Mason and Catherine were already seated, their faces calm, too calm. They didn't know I was prepared for this. They didn't know I had all the evidence, all the proof of their betrayal. Mason looked up as I entered, his smile forced. "Ava, I'm glad you could make it," he said, his voice oozing with fake warmth. "We've been waiting for you." I didn't respond. Instead, I took my seat, placing a folder on the table in front of me, the folder containing all the documentation, all the texts, the recordings, and the toxicology reports. The air in the room grew thicker with each passing second, as if the tension was tangibly building between us. Catherine glanced at Mason, her lips curling into a small, tight smile. "You've been making quite a scene lately, Ava," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I don't know what you're hoping to achieve here, but you're out of your depth." I looked at her, my gaze unwavering. "Oh, I think you're wrong about that, Catherine. I've got everything I need to make sure you and Mason pay for what you've done." Mason's face faltered for a second, but he quickly recovered. "What are you talking about?" he said, his voice losing some of its confidence. "This is just nonsense. We're partners. We've been partners for years. Why would I ever—" "Stop pretending," I interrupted, sliding the folder across the table toward them. "The texts, the emails, the recordings, everything. It's all right here. You've been poisoning me, trying to sabotage my career, all so you could get ahead." Catherine's face went pale, and for the first time I saw a crack in her composed exterior. Mason's eyes flickered to the folder, and I could see the realization hit him like a wave. He had underestimated me, and now the truth was out. "You think we didn't know?" I continued, my voice cold as ice. "You thought I wouldn't notice all those accidents, all those times I got sick after dinner with you two. You thought you could poison me and get away with it." Mason opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence in the room was deafening, and I could see the guilt and panic swirling in his eyes. Catherine, on the other hand, sat there frozen, as if she couldn't comprehend the depth of what was happening. "You were just a pawn in a bigger game, Ava," Mason finally said, his voice shaking with frustration. "We never meant for it to go this far. We just wanted you out of the way so we could get the Henderson account. You were making everything too difficult. But now it's too late. You don't have proof. You can't prove anything." I leaned forward, my voice steady, but filled with certainty. "I've got the proof, and you've been caught." I watched as Mason's face drained of color. He looked at Catherine, his eyes wild with fear, as if looking for an escape route. But it was too late. The truth was out, and nothing they could say would change it now. Suddenly, Mason jumped up, knocking over his chair in the process. "You don't understand, Ava," he yelled. "You have no idea what you're talking about. This isn't what you think. It was never supposed to be like this. We didn't mean to hurt you. I stood up as well, my voice firm, cutting through the chaos. "No, Mason, you don't get to turn this around on me. You tried to kill me. You tried to poison me so you could take everything I worked for, and now you're going to pay for it." I looked at Catherine, whose eyes were filled with panic. She was shaking, her hands trembling uncontrollably as she stood up, backing away. "Ava, please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We didn't mean for it to go this far. We just wanted to win. We didn't want to hurt you." I shook my head, my breath shallow with fury. "You've been trying to ruin me from the start, Catherine. You and Mason both, and now it's over. You're done." The door to the room opened suddenly, and Detective Summers walked in, her presence like a breath of fresh air in the midst of the storm. "I believe this meeting is over," she said calmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "Mason, Catherine, you're both under arrest for conspiracy, poisoning, and attempted murder." I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me as Mason and Catherine were escorted out of the room, their hands cuffed behind their backs. I had won. I had finally exposed them for the monsters they truly were. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and a deep sense of closure that I hadn't expected to feel. Mason and Catherine's trial was long and drawn out, but the evidence was undeniable. They were both found guilty on all charges, and the judge sentenced them to prison time, the weight of their actions finally catching up with them. But through it all, I remained focused. I had taken back control of my life. I had exposed the truth, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. I looked back at everything I had gone through, the poisonings, the lies, the constant fear, and realized that it had all led to this moment. I had survived, and now I was stronger than ever before. I was no longer just Ava. I was a woman who had fought for her truth, for her life. And I was ready for whatever came next. The story of Ava's triumph over betrayal and manipulation is a powerful reminder of the strength we all have when faced with adversity. It illustrates how the pursuit of justice is not just about exposing wrongdoers, but also about reclaiming our power and dignity. Ava's journey, from being poisoned by those closest to her to taking control of her own fate, speaks to the resilience of the human spirit. What stands out most is Ava's courage to face the truth, no matter how difficult or terrifying it may have been. She didn't let fear rule her, and through careful planning and persistence, she turned the tables on those who sought to destroy her. The story also highlights the importance of trusting our instincts and standing firm in the face of manipulation and deceit. In the end, Ava's victory is not just about bringing her enemies to justice. It's a personal reclamation of her life. It's a reminder that no matter how dark things may seem, we have the power to turn things around and emerge stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever.